June 22nd, 1944. 4:47 a.m. Army Group Center Headquarters, Belarus. Oberstleutnant Karl Richter stands in front of a map that's about to become useless. He's looking at the red lines marking Soviet positions. They're everywhere. 50 kilometers of front line assigned to his depleted Panzer battalion. His adjutant hands him the morning situation report. 143 men per kilometer. Richter does the math in his head. In Normandy, the Allies have over 100,000 troops crashing into prepared German defenses. Here, in the Belarusian forests, Army Group Center is holding a front wider than from Paris to Brussels, with fewer men than those who defended a single French beach. His battalion is supposed to be the reserve, the fire brigade, the force that plugs the breakthrough when it comes. Not if, when. Because Karl Richter knows something that High Command in Berlin refuses to accept. Army Group Center doesn't have 580 armored fighting vehicles. It has 580 targets. And in exactly 23 minutes, over 2 million Soviet soldiers are going to prove him right. What happens next will destroy 28 of 34 German divisions in 3 weeks, the largest military defeat in German history. And Karl Richter will watch it happen from inside a Panzer IV command tank, unable to stop it, unable to save his men, unable to do anything except survive long enough to understand how completely they've lost. All because somebody in Berlin looked at a map and decided 580 tanks was enough. Karl Heinrich Richter was born in 1912 in Cologne. The son of a factory foreman, he grew up in the Weimar Republic's chaos, inflation, political violence, and unemployment. By the time Hitler took power in 1933, Richter had already decided his future. The army. Structure. Order. Purpose. He joins the Wehrmacht in 1935. 2 years later, he's commanding a Panzer platoon. Poland, France, the early victories. Richter is good at his job. Precise, methodical. The kind of officer who reads terrain like a book and sees the enemy's mistakes before they make them. Operation Barbarossa, June 1941. Richter is a company commander in the 3rd Panzer Group, driving toward Moscow. The first months are intoxicating. Encirclements of hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers. Villages burning. The endless flat horizon. They're winning so fast that supply convoys can't keep up. The cold doesn't just stop the German advance. It kills it. Temperatures drop to 40 below zero. Tank engines won't start. Machine gun oil freezes solid. Soldiers lose fingers and toes to frostbite. The Soviets counterattack in December, and suddenly the Wehrmacht is retreating for the first time in the war. By 1943, he's a battalion commander in the 5th Panzer Division. Kursk, the massive tank battle, happens in July. The Germans lose. A month later, they're retreating again. And again. And again. Every retreat costs tanks, guns, vehicles, men. Replacements arrive, but they're never enough. The veterans die. The new soldiers' last days, sometimes hours. The Panzer divisions that once had 200 tanks now field 80. Then 60. Then 40. By June 1944, Richter's battalion has 22 operational tanks. Army Group Center has 580 armored, fighting vehicles for a front 1,100 kilometers wide. Do the math. That's 1 tank for every 2 kilometers of front line. The Soviets facing them have around 4,000 armored vehicles. June 22nd, 1944, 5:10 a.m. Richter is in his command post, a dugout near Vitebsk, when the bombardment starts. It's not artillery fire. It's an earthquake made of metal and explosives. Over 2 million artillery shells in 2 hours. The Germans call it Feuerzauber, fire magic. The Soviets call it a reconnaissance by fire. Richter calls it the end of the world. The sound is physical. It presses against your chest, makes your teeth hurt. Men who've survived 3 years of Eastern Front combat curl into balls and weep. The earth shakes. Trees explode. Bunkers collapse. Communication lines are shredded in the first 10 minutes. Richter tries to reach division headquarters. The radio is dead. He sends a runner. The runner never arrives. 5:45 a.m. The artillery lifts. For 30 seconds, there's silence. Then the Soviet infantry emerges from the smoke. Not scattered groups. Not probing attacks. Entire divisions, advancing in tight formation, heavy weapons integrated, flamethrower tanks and assault guns in support. They've rehearsed this. They know exactly where the German positions are, exactly where the gaps are, exactly how to crack the defensive line. Richter watches through binoculars as the German first line crumbles. Companies surrounded, battalions overrun. The radios that still work are screaming for help, for reinforcements, for Panzer support. This is the moment Richter's battalion exists for. The fire brigade. Rush to the breakthrough, seal the gap, hold until the front stabilizes. There's just one problem. The front is breaking everywhere at once. June 22nd, 1944, 7:30 a.m. Richter leads his battalion forward. 22 tanks against multiple Soviet tank corps. The math is suicide, but they have no choice. Somewhere ahead, German infantry is dying. If the Panzers don't counterattack, the entire sector collapses. They drive through chaos, burning vehicles, retreating soldiers, wounded men calling for help. Richter's tank commander spots Soviet T-34s, hull down behind a tree line. 8 of them, maybe 10. Standard doctrine, suppress with fire, maneuver to the flank, hit them from the side where their armor is weakest. But before Richter can give the order, something else appears. ISU-152 self-propelled guns. Heavy assault vehicles with 152 EME cannons that can punch through any German armor at any range. 4 of them, advancing with the T-34s. Then the infantry. Soviet rifle companies, moving in coordinated waves, covered by mortars and machine gun fire. Richter's battalion has 22 tanks and minimal infantry support. The Soviets in front of him have a combined arms assault group with overwhelming firepower. He attacks anyway. The first German shot hits a T-34. It brews up, turret blown clean off. The second shot misses. Then the ISU-152s fire back. A 152 EME shell doesn't just penetrate armor. It obliterates it. The tank to Richter's left disappears in a flash of orange light. No fire, no smoke. Just gone. Turret, crew, everything. The T-34s are moving now, flanking left and right. The Soviet infantry is closing in with anti-tank guns. Richter's battalion is outnumbered, outgunned, and about to be surrounded. He gives the order to fall back. They've been in combat for 11 minutes. 4 tanks destroyed, 0 enemy positions captured. The breakthrough continues. June 23rd, 1944. Richter's battalion no longer exists as a functioning unit. 18 tanks left, scattered across 50 kilometers, trying to plug breakthroughs that multiply faster than they can respond. Division headquarters has lost contact with 2 entire regiments. Corps headquarters can't reach division. Army Group Center is dissolving in real time. Richter reads the situation reports when he can get them. The numbers are insane. The Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army, an entire army of armor, has punched through Sitcorp and is driving into the German rear. Towns that were behind the front line yesterday are surrounded today. Supply depots are being overrun. Headquarters units are fleeing west. VI Corps Commander General Georg Pfeiffer is somewhere in the chaos, trying to coordinate a defense with divisions that no longer exist. On June 28th, Pfeiffer is killed. Nobody knows exactly how. Enemy fire, probably. Or an airstrike, or just lost in the confusion and caught by Soviet infantry. It doesn't matter. VI Corps ceases to exist. June 29th, 1944. Richter is down to 9 operational tanks. Most of his crews are wounded. They're running on captured Soviet fuel because their own supply lines are cut. The radio reports are fragmentary, terrifying. Vitebsk surrounded. Orsha fallen. Mogilev under attack. Minsk threatened. The Soviet advance is 150 kilometers deep. In 1 week, Richter sits in his tank, staring at a map that's more red than blue, and understands the truth. This isn't a defeat. This is annihilation. Operation Bagration will destroy 28 of Army Group Center's 34 divisions. 400,000 German soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. The largest single defeat in German military history. Worse than Stalingrad. Worse than Kursk. Worse than anything. And it's happening because somebody decided 580 tanks was enough. July 8, 1944. East of Minsk. Richter's battalion, what's left of it, is retreating. Again, always retreating. They fight delaying actions, burn bridges, set ambushes, do everything possible to slow the Soviet advance. It doesn't matter, the Soviets keep coming. Richter has 4 tanks left. He's been in continuous combat for 16 days. He hasn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch in that entire time. His uniform smells like burned metal and death. They cross a river. Engineers blow the bridge behind them. It buys 6 hours before the Soviets build a pontoon crossing. That night, Richter receives orders to report to the rear. His battalion is being disbanded. The survivors will be distributed to other units. He looks at the 3 other tank commanders. Boys, really. None of them older than 22. They've been fighting since June 22nd. They're still alive, somehow. We held, one of them says. Richter doesn't answer, because they didn't hold. Nobody held. The entire front collapsed, and 400,000 men paid the price. Karl Richter survives the war. Captured by the Americans in 1945, released in 1947. He returns to Cologne, finds his family home destroyed by Allied bombing. His parents are dead. His brother is missing in Russia, presumed dead. He gets a job in a factory. The same factory where his father worked. He marries, has children, lives quietly. He never talks about Operation Bagration. When people ask about the war, he gives the same answer every time. We did what we could. He died in 1983. His obituary mentions he served in the Wehrmacht. It doesn't mention that he commanded a Panzer battalion during the largest defeat in German military history. Numbers matter. Math matters. You can't hold 1,100 kilometers of front with 580 tanks against 5,200 enemy tanks and expect to win. Courage doesn't overcome arithmetic. Skill doesn't overcome overwhelming force. The German officers in Army Group Center weren't cowards. They weren't incompetent. Many were veterans of 3 years of brutal combat on the Eastern Front. They knew their jobs. They did everything right. It wasn't enough. Because war isn't just about individual heroism. It's about logistics, resources, and industrial capacity. The Soviets had rebuilt their army after the disasters of 1941 and 1942. By 1944, they had more tanks, more artillery, more aircraft, more everything. Army Group Center had 580 tanks and a front line held together with hope. The result was inevitable. When the fighting ended, 28 German divisions were gone. 400,000 men. The Soviet advance reached the outskirts of Warsaw. Germany lost more ground in 3 weeks than in the previous 3 years combined. Operation Bagration doesn't get the attention of D-Day or the Battle of the Bulge in the West. But it was the decisive campaign of 1944. It shattered German military power on the Eastern Front and opened the road to Berlin. And officers like Karl Richter watched it happen from inside their tanks, fighting delaying actions they knew were pointless, watching men die for yards of ground they'd abandon the next day, understanding the war was lost, but fighting anyway, because that's what soldiers do. 580 tanks versus the Soviet tide. It was never a fair fight. Subscribe so you don't miss the rest of history's bloodiest front.